I answered the phone expecting to hear David's voice like any other evening, but what I heard instead made my blood run cold. He was smiling, I could tell by his tone, asking me how my day went, what I was cooking for dinner, the usual small talk that husbands make when they're pretending everything is normal. But then I heard it. A woman's voice in the background, crisp and commanding, telling him exactly what to say to me. Tell her you'll be late again tonight. Tell her it's because of work. No, don't mention dinner with us. Just say you have a meeting. My stomach dropped. That voice belonged to Margaret, my mother-in-law, and suddenly 3 years of marriage started making a completely different kind of sense. My name is Rebecca Harrison, and I'm 31 years old. I live in Portland, Oregon, in a modest 2-bedroom house that David and I bought shortly after we got married. We met 5 years ago at a coffee shop in downtown Portland, one of those trendy places with exposed brick walls and baristas who take their craft way too seriously. David was charming, attentive, everything a woman could want. He had kind eyes, a warm smile, and he listened when I talked, really listened. We dated for 2 years before he proposed, and I thought I knew everything about him. I thought I was marrying my best friend. But I never really knew Margaret, his mother, until after the wedding. She lived in Seattle, a 3-hour drive away, so during our courtship, I only met her a handful of times. She was polite, pleasant even, though there was always something measured about her smile, something calculating in the way she observed me. The wedding was beautiful. We got married in a small vineyard outside Portland on a perfect September afternoon. The leaves were just beginning to turn, painting the landscape in shades of amber and gold. Margaret wore an elegant cream dress that was just one shade away from white, which should have been my first clue. During the reception, she gave a toast that seemed touching at the time, but looking back was filled with subtle warnings. David has always needed guidance, she said, raising her glass with a practiced smile. And I'm sure Rebecca will learn what's best for him, just as I have spent 33 years learning. People laughed, thinking it was a joke. I laughed too. I had no idea she meant every word. The first year of marriage was mostly smooth. David was working as an accountant at a medium-sized firm in Portland, and I worked as a graphic designer from home. We had our routines, our little habits, our inside jokes. But I started noticing small things. David would get text messages at odd hours, and his face would tighten when he read them. He'd sometimes change plans we'd made, without really explaining why. Something came up, he'd say, and I trusted him, so I didn't push. I wish I had pushed. I wish I had asked more questions instead of being the understanding wife who didn't want to seem needy or controlling. If you're listening to this story and recognizing some of these patterns in your own life, I hope you'll stick with me to the end. And if you could help me reach 1,000 subscribers by clicking that subscribe button, I'd really appreciate it. This channel is growing because of people like you who want to hear real stories about real situations. Your subscription means everything to reaching that goal. By the second year, things started changing more noticeably. David began spending weekends in Seattle, visiting his mother. At first, it was once a month, then twice, then almost every weekend. She's getting older, he'd explain. She needs help with things around the house. Margaret was 62, perfectly healthy, and had a handyman on speed dial, but I told myself I was being unreasonable. After all, what kind of wife complains about a man who cares for his elderly mother? Except she wasn't elderly, and she didn't need help. What she needed was control. The phone call that changed everything happened on a Thursday evening in October. I was in our kitchen, trying a new recipe for chicken piccata, something I'd seen online, and wanted to surprise David with. The Portland rain was doing its typical autumn performance against the windows, that steady rhythm that's somehow both soothing and melancholic. My phone rang at exactly 6:15, and David's name appeared on the screen. I answered cheerfully, expecting him to tell me he was on his way home from work. "Hey, honey," he said, and his voice had that particular brightness that I'd learned meant he was about to deliver bad news, but wanted to soften the blow.
How's your day been?
"What are you up to?" "I'm cooking dinner," I replied, stirring the capers into the sauce. "That chicken dish I mentioned should be ready in about 30 minutes. Are you leaving the office soon?" That's when I heard it. A woman's voice in the background, distinct and commanding despite being slightly muffled. "Tell her you'll be late again tonight. Tell her it's because of work." It was Margaret's voice. I'd know it anywhere. Then, more quietly but still audible, "No, don't mention dinner with us. Just say you have a meeting." David cleared his throat. "Actually, babe, I'm going to be late tonight. There's this meeting that just came up, you know how it is with end-of-quarter reviews. Probably won't be home until 9 or so. Don't wait up for dinner." My hand froze on the wooden spoon. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears, competing with the sound of the rain. "A meeting," I repeated slowly, "at 6:15 on a Thursday night. In October, during end-of-quarter reviews." "Yeah, you know how demanding Mr. Peterson can be," David said, and I could hear the strain in his voice now, the way he was trying to sound casual but couldn't quite pull it off. "David," I said quietly, "where are you right now?" There was a pause. I could hear Margaret's voice again in the background, but I couldn't make out the words. "I'm at the office," he finally said. "Where else would I be?" "Before you hear what happened next, I want to ask you something. Have you ever had that moment where everything suddenly makes sense, where all the little pieces you'd been ignoring suddenly form a picture you can't unsee? If this story is resonating with you, please click that subscribe button. We're working toward 1,000 subscribers, and every single one matters. It's just one click, but it helps this channel grow and reach more people who need to hear stories like this." "You're lying to me," I said, and my voice came out calmer than I felt. "I can hear your mother in the background. You're not at the office, David. You're with Margaret, and she's telling you what to say to me." The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear David breathing, could almost feel his panic through the phone line. Then Margaret's voice came through clearly, no longer trying to stay in the background. "David, hang up the phone. Hang up right now." But he didn't hang up. Maybe he was too shocked, or maybe some part of him knew this moment had been coming and was almost relieved it was finally here. "Rebecca, I can explain," he started. "Can you?" I interrupted. "Can you explain why your mother is with you right now, coaching you through a phone call with your wife? Can you explain why you've been lying to me about where you are and what you're doing? Because I would love to hear that explanation, David." I heard Margaret again, her voice sharp with irritation. "Give me the phone, David. Let me talk to her." "No, Mom, just—" David started, but there was a rustling sound, and then Margaret's voice came through clearly. "Rebecca, dear, I think you're overreacting," she said, and her tone was the same one you'd use with a hysterical child. David simply stopped by to have dinner with his mother. There's nothing sinister about a son wanting to spend time with his family. Then why did he lie about it? I asked. "Why didn't he just say he was having dinner with you?" "Because you get so emotional about these things," Margaret replied smoothly. "You make such a fuss whenever David wants to visit me. We were simply trying to avoid unnecessary drama." Something inside me snapped. Maybe it was the condescending tone, or the way she said unnecessary drama like my feelings were just an inconvenience. Maybe it was the realization that this had been going on for who knows how long, that my husband had been lying to me on his mother's orders. "Put David back on the phone," I said coldly. There was more rustling, and then David's voice, small and ashamed. "Rebecca, I'm sorry. I should have just told you. Come home," I said. "Right now. We need to talk about this, and we're going to do it without your mother present." "Rebecca, I really think—" Margaret started, but I cut her off. "I'm talking to my husband, Margaret. This is between David and me." I hung up before either of them could respond. My hands were shaking. The chicken piccata was starting to burn, and I turned off the stove, suddenly having no appetite at all. I stood in my kitchen, in the house David and I had bought together, surrounded by the life we'd built, and wondered how much of it had been real. If you're invested in finding out what happened next, please hit that subscribe button. We're building a community here, and your subscription helps us reach that 1,000 subscriber goal. Plus, you'll make sure you don't miss the rest of the story. David came home 45 minutes later. I'd spent that time sitting on our couch, replaying every moment of our relationship, every time he'd been vague about his plans, every weekend trip to Seattle, every time he'd changed his mind about something we'd agreed on. The rain had gotten heavier, and when he walked through the door, he was soaked. His hair was plastered to his forehead, and he looked miserable. "Rebecca," he started, but I held up my hand. "Sit down," I said. "And don't lie to me anymore. I want the truth. All of it. How long has this been going on?" He sank into the armchair across from me, water dripping onto the hardwood floor we'd spent a weekend refinishing together last spring. "It's not what you think," he said. "Then tell me what it is," I replied. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like your mother has been controlling you, controlling us, controlling our marriage, and you've been letting her." David ran his hands through his wet hair. "She just wants what's best for me. For us." "What's best for us?" I repeated incredulously. "David, she was literally feeding you lines to lie to your wife. How is that what's best for us?" "You don't understand what it's like," he said, and there was a desperation in his voice I'd never heard before. "Growing up with her. She's always been involved in every decision I make. She's always had opinions about everything. My friends, my school, my career, and yes, my relationships." "Did she have opinions about me?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. He looked away. "She thought you were too independent, too career-focused. She worried you wouldn't prioritize family the way she did." "And you didn't think that was something I should know?" I asked. "You didn't think I had a right to know that your mother disapproved of me, that she was working behind the scenes to undermine our marriage?" "She wasn't trying to undermine anything," David protested weakly. "She just wanted to stay connected with me, with us." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "David, normal mothers-in-law stay connected by calling occasionally or visiting for holidays. They don't coach their sons through phone calls with their wives. They don't tell their sons to lie about where they are or who they're with." He was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. I know it's not normal, but it's all I've ever known." And that's when I realized the full scope of what I was dealing with. This wasn't just about Margaret being overbearing. This was about David never having developed the tools to set boundaries with her, never having been allowed to become his own person separate from his mother's expectations and demands. Your support means so much to this channel. If you could take just a second to click that subscribe button, it would help us tremendously in reaching our goal of 1,000 subscribers. Thank you for being part of this community and for listening to this story. What else has she been telling you to do?" I asked. "What other decisions in our marriage have been made by Margaret instead of by us?" David looked like he was going to be sick. "She suggested we wait to have kids. She said we weren't financially ready, that we needed to save more money first." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. We'd been trying to get pregnant for 6 months before David suddenly changed his mind, saying he wanted to wait. I'd been devastated, but he'd been so logical about it, presenting a whole budget analysis showing why we should wait. "She made you do that budget?" I asked. He nodded miserably. "She helped me with it. She's good with numbers, and I thought maybe she had a point." "What else?" I demanded. "She didn't like your friend Emma," he admitted. "She said Emma was a bad influence, always talking about her divorce and making you think negatively about marriage. She suggested I discourage you from spending so much time with her." I thought about how David had started making plans on the nights Emma and I usually got together, how he'd guilt me about not spending enough time with him. "And the job offer I got last year?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "The one in Seattle that I turned down because you said you couldn't leave Portland?" "She thought if you moved to Seattle, you'd be too close, that she wouldn't have her privacy with me anymore," David said. "But also, she thought the job wasn't right for you, that it would be too stressful." I stood up, needing to move, needing to do something with the anger and betrayal coursing through me. "That job would have doubled my salary, David. It was an incredible opportunity. And I turned it down because you convinced me that our life here was more important. But it wasn't about our life here at all, was it? It was about making sure I wasn't in Seattle, making sure your mother didn't have to share you." "I'm sorry," he said, and tears were streaming down his face now. "I'm so sorry, Rebecca. I didn't see it before. I didn't see how wrong it all was. But you see it now?" I asked. "Or are you just sorry you got caught?" He looked up at me, And for the first time, I saw genuine clarity in his eyes. I see it now. Tonight, when she grabbed the phone from me and started talking to you like you were the problem, like you were some obstacle she had to manage, I saw it. I saw how crazy this all is. I wanted to believe him. I wanted so badly to believe that this moment of revelation would change everything, that we could work through this and come out stronger on the other side. But I also knew that breaking free from a lifetime of maternal control wasn't something that would happen overnight. We're almost at 1,000 subscribers, and I want to thank everyone who's already joined this channel. If you haven't subscribed yet, please click that button now. Your support helps stories like this reach people who need to hear them. What do you want to do? David asked me. Do you want a divorce? I would understand if you did. I sat back down, suddenly exhausted. I don't know what I want, I admitted. A few hours ago, I thought I was in a normal marriage with normal problems. Now I find out that my mother-in-law has been puppeteering my husband for our entire relationship. I don't even know what's real anymore, David. I don't know which decisions were actually yours and which ones were hers. They were all mine, he said quickly. I made every choice. Mom didn't force me to do anything. Didn't she? I challenged. Because it sounds to me like you've been following her script your entire life. You're 33 years old, David, and you can't have a phone conversation with your wife without your mother coaching you through it. That's not normal. That's not healthy. He buried his face in his hands. I know it's not. The question is, I continued, are you willing to do something about it? Are you willing to set boundaries with Margaret? Because I can't live like this anymore. I won't live like this anymore. If we're going to have any chance of saving this marriage, things have to change. You have to change. I'll do whatever it takes, he said, looking up at me with desperate eyes. I love you, Rebecca. I don't want to lose you. Then prove it, I said. Starting tomorrow, we're going to find a marriage counselor who specializes in family issues. And you're going to call your mother and tell her that she can no longer be involved in decisions about our marriage. No more coaching, no more suggestions, no more interference. The look on his face told me exactly how difficult he knew that conversation with Margaret was going to be. She's not going to take it well, he said. I don't care how she takes it, I replied. This is about us, about our marriage, about having a relationship that's actually ours and not one that's being managed by your mother. If you can't have that conversation with her, if you can't set those boundaries, then we don't have a marriage worth saving. He nodded slowly. Okay, I'll call her tomorrow. No, I said firmly. You'll call her tonight. Right now. And I'm going to be sitting right here while you do it. If you're still with me on this journey, I want to encourage you to subscribe to the channel. We're building something special here, a place where real stories get told and real experiences get shared. Click that subscribe button and help us reach 1,000 subscribers. David's hands were shaking as he pulled out his phone. He stared at it for a long moment before finally pressing Margaret's number. She answered on the first ring. David, thank God, she said, her voice coming through the speaker clearly because his hands were trembling so much. Is she still being unreasonable? Do you need me to talk to her again? Mom, David said, and his voice cracked. I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen without interrupting. There was a pause. All right, Margaret said cautiously. Tonight was unacceptable, David continued. What you did, coaching me through that phone call, telling me to lie to Rebecca, all of it was wrong. And it's not the first time. I've let you have too much influence over my life, over my marriage, and it needs to stop. David, I don't know what that woman has been telling you. Margaret started, but David cut her off. Don't call her that woman, he said, and there was a strength in his voice I hadn't heard before. Her name is Rebecca. She's my wife, and she deserves your respect. More importantly, she deserves a husband who makes decisions with her, not one who lets his mother make them for him. I have never made decisions for you, Margaret said coldly. I've only ever offered guidance. Guidance is suggesting, David replied. What you've been doing is manipulating. You've been controlling aspects of my life and my marriage, and I've let you because I didn't know any different. But I know different now. This is ridiculous, Margaret said, and I could hear the anger building in her voice. After everything I've done for you, After the sacrifices I've made raising you on my own after your father left, this is how you repay me? By letting your wife turn you against me. Rebecca isn't turning me against you, David said. But she has shown me that healthy relationships have boundaries. And starting now, we're going to have boundaries. What kind of boundaries? Margaret asked, and the word dripped with disdain. David looked at me, and I nodded encouragingly. You can't be involved in decisions about our marriage anymore, he said. Not about when we have kids, not about where we live, not about Rebecca's career or her friendships. Those are our decisions to make together. I see, Margaret said icily. And I suppose I'm not welcome to visit anymore either? You're welcome to visit, David said. But you'll call first and coordinate with both of us, not just show up or expect me to drop everything. And when you're here, you'll be a guest in our home, which means you'll respect Rebecca and the way we choose to live our lives. This is absurd, Margaret snapped. You're my son, David. I have a right to be part of your life. You do have a right to be part of my life, David agreed. But you don't have a right to control it. There's a difference, Mom, and I should have seen it sooner. Please take a moment to subscribe if you haven't already. We're so close to reaching 1,000 subscribers, and each one of you who subscribes makes a real difference. Click that button and join our growing community. Margaret was silent for a long moment, and when she spoke again, her voice had changed. It was softer, wounded. I can't believe you're doing this to me. After everything we've been through together, I thought we were closer than this. And there it was, the guilt trip, the emotional manipulation that had probably worked on David his entire life. I watched his face, saw the conflict there, the years of conditioning warring with his newfound understanding. I reached out and took his hand, squeezing it gently. We're close, Mom, David said, and I was proud of how steady his voice remained. But being close doesn't mean you get to make my decisions for me. It doesn't mean you get to interfere in my marriage. If you love me, you'll respect these boundaries. And if I don't, Margaret asked coldly. Then we'll have to limit contact until you can, David said, and I could feel his hand trembling in mine. I don't want that, Mom. I want you within my life. But not like this. Not at the expense of my marriage and my own autonomy. Margaret hung up without another word. David stared at his phone, and I could see the tears streaming down his face. She hates me now, he whispered. She doesn't hate you, I said, moving to sit beside him on the couch. She's angry because you've disrupted the dynamic she's comfortable with. But if she really loves you, she'll come around. And if she doesn't, then maybe the relationship you thought you had with her wasn't as healthy as you believed. We sat there together for a long time, listening to the rain, processing everything that had happened. It was after midnight when we finally went to bed, both of us exhausted but somehow lighter, like a weight we hadn't fully acknowledged had been lifted. The next morning, I called my friend Sarah, who's a licensed family therapist. She recommended a colleague who specialized in enmeshed family systems and boundary issues. We got an appointment for the following week. David called in sick to work, and we spent the day talking, really talking, about our relationship and our future. I need to hear about all of it, I told him as we sat at the kitchen table with coffee and the burned remains of last night's chicken piccata. Every time Margaret influenced a decision in our marriage, every time she gave you advice that affected us, I need to know the full extent of it. Over the next several hours, David laid it all out. How Margaret had suggested I might be having an affair because I went to the gym 3 times a week. How she'd convinced him that my student loan debt was a red flag, even though I'd been making payments consistently. How she told him that I was probably exaggerating my migraines because women tend to be dramatic about pain. How she'd said my family was too loud and unsophisticated when they visited for Christmas. Every revelation was a fresh cut, a new understanding of how deeply Margaret's influence had penetrated our marriage. If this story is speaking to you, if you've experienced something similar or know someone who has, please subscribe to this channel. We're working toward that 1,000 subscriber milestone, and your support makes all the difference. Click that subscribe button and be part of this community. Why didn't you defend me? I asked after he'd told me about the Christmas comment. When she said those things about me, about my family, why didn't you stand up for me? Because I thought she might be right. David admitted, and the shame on his face was evident. I thought she was just being honest, just looking out for me. I didn't understand that she was undermining you, undermining us. I thought that's just how mothers were. That's not how mothers are, I said. My mother would never interfere in my marriage like that. She trusts me to make my own decisions, even when she doesn't agree with them. That's what healthy parenting looks like. I'm starting to see that, David said quietly. I'm starting to see a lot of things I should have seen years ago. Margaret didn't call or text for 3 days. It was the longest David had gone without hearing from her in as long as he could remember. On the 4th day, she sent a text message. I've been thinking about what you said. I'm willing to try to respect your boundaries, but I think you're making a mistake. Don't say I didn't warn you when this all falls apart. Even her acquiescence came with a threat, but it was a start, I supposed. Our first therapy session was intense. Dr. Morrison, the therapist Sarah had recommended, had us each tell our version of our relationship story. As David talked about his upbringing, I learned things I'd never known. His father had left when he was 5, and Margaret had told him repeatedly that men couldn't be trusted, that he needed to be different, that he needed to always listen to her because she was the only one who would never abandon him. She'd monitored his friendships, discouraged him from dating seriously until he was almost 30, and had made it clear that any woman he chose would have to meet her exacting standards. And did Rebecca meet those standards? Dr. Morrison asked. David looked at me apologetically.
No.
Mom thought she was too independent, too focused on her career. She worried that Rebecca wouldn't put me first. And what do you think now?
Dr. Morrison asked.
I think Mom was wrong, David said. I think Rebecca has always put our marriage first, but she also has her own identity and her own ambitions, and that's healthy. That's good. I think what Mom really meant was that Rebecca wouldn't put Mom first, wouldn't let Mom remain the primary woman in my life. Thank you to everyone who's subscribed so far. If you're still watching and haven't clicked that button yet, now is the perfect time. Help us reach 1,000 subscribers and keep bringing you real, authentic stories like this one. Over the following weeks, things slowly started to change. David began recognizing when he was defaulting to his mother's opinions instead of forming his own. He started asking me about my feelings and perspectives instead of assuming he knew what was best. We had arguments, real arguments where we disagreed and worked through it, instead of David just acquiescing to whatever avoided conflict. Margaret tried to call several times, but David held firm on his boundaries. He talked to her once a week on Sunday afternoons, conversations that lasted no more than 30 minutes. He stopped making weekend trips to Seattle. When Margaret complained that she never saw him anymore, he invited her to visit Portland, but made it clear she needed to give us advance notice and stay in a hotel, not our guest room. The first time she visited under the new rules was in late November, right before Thanksgiving. She arrived on a Saturday afternoon, and David picked her up from her hotel. I'd been dreading this moment, wondering if she would respect the boundaries, or if she'd revert to her old patterns the moment she was in our presence. She walked into our home with a tight smile, carrying a store-bought pie. "Rebecca," she said, her tone polite but cool. "Thank you for having me." "Of course," I replied, matching her formality. "It's good to see you, Margaret." The afternoon was awkward, filled with stilted conversation and long silences. Margaret made a few comments that bordered on inappropriate, suggesting that our furniture arrangement was impractical and that the color I'd painted the kitchen was too dark. Each time, David gently but firmly redirected her. "We like our home the way it is, Mom," he'd say. "Rebecca and I chose these things together." By the time David drove her back to her hotel that evening, I was exhausted. "That was brutal," I said when he returned. "It was," he agreed. "But did you notice? She didn't try to give me instructions about us. She didn't pull me aside to share her concerns about you. She was uncomfortable, but she respected the boundaries." "It's a start," I said. Thanksgiving was better. We hosted dinner at our house, and Margaret came along with my parents and my brother's family. Having other people there seemed to help. Margaret couldn't dominate the conversation, couldn't pull David aside for private consultations. She was forced to be part of a larger group dynamic, and while she clearly didn't enjoy it, she managed to be civil. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any updates or new stories. We're building a community here, and we want you to be part of it. Just click that subscribe button and help us reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers. By December, things had improved enough that David and I started talking seriously about our future again. The topic of children came up one evening as we were decorating our Christmas tree. It was one of those perfect Portland winter nights, cold and crisp, with snow threatening but not quite falling. "Do you still want to have kids?" David asked as he hung an ornament his grandmother had given him years ago. "I do," I said carefully. "But I need to know that any decision we make about starting a family is our decision, not one influenced by your mother." "It will be our decision," David promised. Dr. Morrison has been helping me understand the difference between hearing Mom's perspective and letting her perspective become mine. I can listen to her without agreeing with her. I can make my own choices. "And what do you choose?" I asked. "About kids. About our future." "What do you want, David?" He set down the ornament he was holding and came to stand in front of me. "I want a family with you. I want kids who grow up in a house where they're encouraged to be themselves, where they're taught that healthy relationships have boundaries. I want to be a better father than my dad was, and I want to break the cycle of control that my mom perpetuated. I want us to raise children who know they're loved without conditions." I felt tears prick my eyes. This was the man I'd married, or rather, this was who he was becoming now that he'd stepped out from under Margaret's shadow. "I want that too," I said. "We stopped trying to prevent pregnancy in January. Margaret found out somehow, probably from a slip David made during one of their weekly calls, and she immediately called him on a Tuesday evening, outside of their scheduled time. 'You're not ready for children,' she said when he answered. 'Rebecca's career is too demanding, and you need to save more money.' This is a mistake, David." For the first time, David laughed at her concerns instead of absorbing them. "Mom, Rebecca, and I have made this decision together. We've looked at our finances, we've talked about how we'll balance work and parenting, and we feel ready. I appreciate your concern, but this is our choice to make." "You'll regret it," Margaret said. "Maybe we will," David replied. "But if we do, it'll be our mistake to make and learn from. That's part of being an adult, Mom. That's part of having our own life." She hung up on him again, but this time, David wasn't devastated. He was calm, even a little amused. "She'll get over it," he said. "Or she won't. Either way, we're moving forward with our lives." I found out I was pregnant in March. We waited until the second trimester to tell people, wanting to make sure everything was progressing safely. When we finally told Margaret during one of her visits to Portland, her reaction was complicated. I could see her trying to summon enthusiasm, trying to be the grandmother she thought she should be, but also struggling with the reality that this child would be raised with boundaries she'd never respected. "Congratulations," she said, and she even hugged me, though it was stiff and brief. "I hope you'll let me be involved in the baby's life." "Of course you'll be involved," David said. "You're the grandmother. But you'll be involved in a healthy way, with appropriate boundaries. Just like we've been practicing. Your subscription helps this channel grow and reach more people with these stories. If you haven't clicked that subscribe button yet, please do it now. We're so close to 1,000 subscribers, and you can be part of that achievement." The pregnancy was relatively smooth, though I had some complications in the third trimester that required bed rest. Margaret actually stepped up during this time in ways I hadn't expected. She came to Portland and stayed in a hotel nearby, helping with errands and cooking meals, but respecting our space and our decisions about my care. When she started to offer unsolicited medical advice, David gently reminded her that we were following our doctor's recommendations, and to my surprise, she backed off. Our daughter, Emily Rose Harrison, was born on a warm October evening, almost exactly 2 years after the phone call that had changed everything. She was perfect, with David's eyes and my stubborn chin. When Margaret came to the hospital to meet her, I saw something in her face I'd never seen before. It might have been tenderness, or maybe it was the realization that holding this baby came with respecting the boundaries we'd set. "She's beautiful," Margaret said softly, holding Emily with practiced ease. "She looks like David did when he was born. Would you like to come visit next week?" I asked, and I genuinely meant it. We'd love to have you meet Emily properly once we're settled at home. I'd like that, Margaret said, and for the first time since I'd known her, her smile seemed completely genuine. It hasn't been perfect. Margaret still occasionally oversteps, still sometimes offers opinions disguised as concerns. But David has gotten much better at recognizing her patterns and maintaining boundaries. And surprisingly, setting those boundaries has actually improved their relationship. Margaret seems more relaxed around us now, less like she has to control everything because she's finally learning to trust that David can handle his own life. Emily is 6 months old now, and she's the light of our lives. David is an amazing father, attentive and patient, and he's determined to raise her with the emotional freedom he never had. We still see Dr. Morrison once a month, maintenance sessions to make sure we're staying on track and dealing with issues as they arise. Last week, something happened that showed me how far we've come. Margaret was visiting for the weekend, staying at her usual hotel, and she mentioned that she thought Emily should start sleep training immediately because she'd read an article about it. The old David would have nodded along, would have suggested we look into it, would have brought it up later as if it were his own idea. Instead, this David smiled and said, "Mom, Rebecca and I have talked to our pediatrician about sleep patterns, and we're comfortable with our approach. Emily will sleep through the night when she's ready." Margaret looked like she wanted to argue, but then she caught herself. I watched the moment of recognition cross her face, the realization that pushing this would violate the boundaries we'd established. "Of course," she said finally. "You two know what's best for your daughter." After she left that evening, David turned to me with a grin. "Did you see that? She actually stopped herself from arguing. That's progress." "It is," I agreed, settling onto the couch with Emily in my arms. "It's taken 2 years, but we're finally in a place where we have a marriage that's actually ours." If you've been following this journey from the beginning, thank you. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please click that button now. We're building a community of people who value authentic stories and real experiences, and we want you to be part of it. Help us reach that 1,000 subscriber goal. Looking back now, that phone call in October 2 years ago was the worst and best thing that could have happened. It was worst because it shattered the illusion I'd been living under, the belief that my marriage was mine when in reality, it had been choreographed by someone else. But it was also the best thing because it forced us to confront issues that would have eventually destroyed us. If I'd never heard Margaret's voice in the background that evening, if I'd never realized David was being coached through our conversations, we might have continued on that path for years. We might have had children while Margaret still controlled every aspect of our lives. We might have woken up 20 years later wondering why we were so unhappy, why we felt like strangers living in the same house. Instead, we fought for our marriage. We did the hard work of establishing boundaries, of building new patterns, of learning how to be partners instead of mother and son with me as the afterthought. It hasn't been easy. There were nights when I wasn't sure we'd make it, when the weight of Margaret's influence seemed too heavy to overcome. There were times when David backslid into old patterns, when he'd agree to something with Margaret without consulting me first, and we have to reset and remember why we were doing this. But we made it. We're still making it every single day, one boundary at a time. I think about all the women who might be in similar situations, who might be married to men who are still enmeshed with their mothers, who might be feeling crazy because they can't quite put their finger on why their marriages feel so suffocating. I want them to know that it's not in their heads. That enmeshment is real, that emotional incest, where a parent uses their child as a substitute for an adult relationship, is a genuine problem that destroys marriages. I want them to know that it's possible to break free, but it requires the person who is enmeshed to recognize the problem and be willing to do the work to change it. David had to want to change. I couldn't force him to see what Margaret was doing. I couldn't make him set boundaries. All I could do was speak my truth, tell him what I needed from our marriage, and be prepared to walk away if he wasn't willing to meet me there. The fact that he chose our marriage over his mother's control is what saved us. If he'd chosen differently, if he'd decided that maintaining the status quo with Margaret was more important than building a healthy relationship with me, we'd be divorced right now. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't already. Your support means everything to this channel, and we're so close to reaching 1,000 subscribers. Just click that button and be part of our community. I also want to acknowledge that Margaret is human too. She's not a villain in some story, even though she's been the antagonist in ours. She's a woman who raised a son alone, who poured everything into him, who made him the center of her universe. When your entire identity is wrapped up in being someone's mother, it's terrifying when that child grows up and doesn't need you anymore. I think Margaret genuinely believed she was helping, that she was protecting David from making mistakes, that she knew what was best because she'd been through more of life than we had. But intention doesn't excuse impact. She hurt our marriage, whether she meant to or not. She tried to control aspects of our lives that weren't hers to control. And while I can understand her fear of becoming irrelevant in David's life, that fear didn't give her the right to manipulate him or undermine me. The therapy helped us understand all of this. Dr. Morrison explained that people like Margaret often come from their own complicated family backgrounds, that they're repeating patterns they learned from their own parents. Margaret's mother had been controlling too, demanding that Margaret sacrifice her own dreams to care for her aging parents. Margaret had internalized the message that love equals sacrifice and control, that being a good mother meant being involved in every aspect of your child's life forever. Breaking generational patterns is hard work. It requires recognizing that just because something was done to you doesn't mean you have to perpetuate it. David is determined that Emily will grow up differently. He wants her to know that she's loved unconditionally, that she can make her own choices even when they're not the choices he would make for her, that having boundaries with her parents when she's an adult will be healthy and encouraged, not seen as a betrayal. We're also very intentional about how we talk about Margaret in front of Emily, even though she's just a baby. We don't want her growing up hearing negative things about her grandmother. We want her to form her own relationship with Margaret, within the boundaries we've set, and to experience her grandmother as someone who loves her, even if that love comes in imperfect ways. Thank you for sticking with this story. If it's resonated with you, please take a moment to subscribe. We're working toward that 1,000 subscriber milestone, and every single subscription helps us reach more people with these authentic stories. Last month, something happened that felt like a real turning point. Margaret called David on a Thursday evening, outside their regular Sunday schedule. My first instinct was concern, wondering what emergency had prompted the call. But when David answered, Margaret said, "I'm sorry to call outside our normal time. I know we have boundaries, but I just wanted to tell you that I'm proud of you." David was visibly shocked. "Proud of me? For what?" "For the man you've become," Margaret said, and I could hear the emotion in her voice through the speaker. "For being a good husband and father. For standing up for your family, even when that family didn't include me in the ways I wanted. I've been doing some therapy of my own, David, and I'm starting to understand some things about myself, about how I raised you. I'm starting to see that the boundaries you set weren't about pushing me away. They were about growing up. And I'm sorry I made that so hard for you." I watched tears stream down David's face. This was the acknowledgement he'd been waiting for his entire life. The validation that setting boundaries didn't mean he was a bad son, that choosing his wife didn't mean he was abandoning his mother. "Thank you, Mom," he said quietly. "That means everything to me." They talked for a few more minutes, and when David hung up, he just held me while he cried. These weren't sad tears. They were the tears of someone who'd finally been released from a weight they'd been carrying for 33 years. "She's really trying," he said when he could speak again. "I never thought she'd actually go to therapy. I never thought she'd be capable of that kind of self-reflection." "People can surprise you," I said. "When they're pushed to the edge, when they realize they might lose what's most important to them, sometimes they find the courage to change." Margaret's transformation hasn't been complete or perfect. She still has moments where the old patterns emerge, where she tries to assert control or offer opinions that cross boundaries. But now she catches herself more often than not. And when she doesn't catch herself, she accepts it when David points it out instead of becoming defensive or making him feel guilty. I think the real breakthrough came when Margaret realized that having boundaries actually improved her relationship with David. When she wasn't constantly trying to manage every aspect of his life, they could have real conversations. They could talk about his feelings, his experiences, his joys and challenges, without everything being filtered through her need to control. They could be mother and son without her having to be his everything. I've started to relax around her too. I no longer feel like I'm in competition with her for David's attention or loyalty. I don't have to steel myself for every visit, waiting for the subtle digs or the suggestions that will undermine my role in my own marriage. We're not best friends, Margaret and I probably never will be, but we've found a way to coexist respectfully, united in our love for David and Emily. Don't forget to subscribe if you've been enjoying this story. We're building something special here, a place for real stories about real challenges and real growth. Click that subscribe button and help us reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers. Emily is starting to show her personality now. She's strong-willed, curious, and absolutely fearless. She reminds me of myself in some ways, which I love, and she has David's capacity for deep thought and observation. Margaret commented on Emily's independence during her last visit, saying, "She knows what she wants, doesn't she?" There was no judgment in the comment, no suggestion that Emily's assertiveness was a problem that needed to be corrected. It was just an observation, maybe even an appreciation. I think Margaret is learning that strong-willed doesn't mean difficult, that independence isn't something to be tamed, that children can be both loved and allowed to be themselves. We celebrated Emily's first birthday last month. It was a small gathering in our backyard, just family and a few close friends. Margaret came, of course, and she brought a thoughtful gift, a children's book collection that had belonged to David when he was young. As I watched her playing with Emily, showing her the pictures in the books, I felt something I never thought I'd feel toward Margaret. It wasn't quite warmth, but it was close. It was acceptance, maybe, or a recognition that she was trying her best with the tools she had. David must have noticed where I was looking because he came up behind me and wrapped his arms around my waist. "Penny, for your thoughts?" he asked. "Just thinking about how far we've come," I said. How different this birthday party would have been 2 years ago. 2 years ago, we might not have made it to this birthday party, David said quietly. I might have lost you, because I was too weak to stand up for us. You weren't weak, I corrected him. You were conditioned. There's a difference. And when it mattered, when you had to choose, you chose us. That's what counts. He kissed the top of my head. Best choice I ever made. Later that evening, after everyone had gone home and Emily was asleep, David and I cleaned up the remnants of the party. We worked in comfortable silence, a team in the way we'd always been meant to be, but had taken so long to become. "Can I tell you something?" David said as he was taking down the birthday banner. "Always," I replied. "Sometimes I wonder who I would be if my dad hadn't left," he said. "If my mom had been happy in her own life instead of making me her entire life. I wonder if I would have been a different person, someone who knew how to set boundaries from the beginning, someone who didn't need his wife to show him that his normal wasn't healthy." Before we wrap up, I want to remind you one more time to subscribe if you haven't already. We're so close to 1,000 subscribers, and your support makes these stories possible. Click that button and join our community. "You can't think like that," I said gently. "You are who you are because of all your experiences, including the hard ones. And yes, you had to learn things later than some people, but you learned them. That's what matters. Some people never learn. Some people stay enmeshed with their parents their entire lives and wonder why their marriages fail or why they feel so empty. You did the work, David. You changed the pattern." "We did the work," he corrected. "You could have given up on me. A lot of women would have. That phone call could have been the end of us, but instead, you gave me the chance to understand what was happening and to fix it." "I gave us the chance," I said, "because I could see who you really were underneath all of Margaret's conditioning. I could see the man I fell in love with, the man who was kind and thoughtful and wanted to be a good partner. He just needed to find his way out from under her shadow." We finished cleaning in silence, and then we went upstairs to check on Emily one more time before going to bed ourselves. She was sleeping peacefully, her small chest rising and falling with steady breaths, one hand clutched around the ear of her favorite stuffed rabbit. "I promise you," David whispered to our sleeping daughter, "I will never make you feel like you owe me your whole life. I will never make you choose between me and the person you love." I will never manipulate you or control you, or make you feel guilty for growing up and having your own thoughts and dreams. I will love you enough to let you go when it's time, and I'll be here when you need me, with boundaries that respect both of us. I took his hand, and we stood there together, watching our daughter sleep, two people who'd almost lost each other but had fought their way back to something real and honest and worth keeping. The thing about breaking free from enmeshment is that it's not a one-time event. It's an ongoing process, a daily choice to maintain healthy boundaries and prioritize your marriage over the dysfunctional patterns of the past. There are still moments when Margaret pushes, when David wavers, when I have to speak up about something that doesn't feel right. But we have tools now. We have communication strategies and boundaries, and a shared understanding of what healthy relationships look like. We also have hope. Hope that Emily will grow up in a home where she sees two parents who are partners, who make decisions together, who love each other enough to protect their marriage from outside interference, even when that interference comes from family. Hope that she'll internalize healthy relationship patterns instead of the dysfunctional ones that almost destroyed her parents' marriage. Hope that we're breaking a generational cycle that probably goes back further than Margaret, further than we can even trace. I think that's what I want people to take away from this story. That it's possible to break free, that it's worth the fight, that marriages can survive and even thrive after confronting enmeshment. But it requires both partners to be committed to the process. It requires the enmeshed person to recognize the problem and be willing to change. It requires the other partner to be patient but also firm about their needs and boundaries. And it requires both people to believe that their marriage is worth saving, worth fighting for, worth the difficult conversations and the painful revelations and the hard work of therapy. If you're in a similar situation, I want you to know that you're not crazy. Your feelings are valid. If you feel like your mother-in-law or father-in-law is too involved in your marriage, if you feel like your spouse makes decisions based on their parents' opinions rather than your own partnership, if you feel like you're competing for your spouse's attention and loyalty, those are real problems that deserve to be addressed. One last reminder to subscribe before we finish the story. We're almost at our goal of 1,000 subscribers, and each one of you who clicks that button helps us build this community and share these important stories. Please subscribe now. And if you're the person who is enmeshed with a parent, I want you to know that setting boundaries doesn't mean you don't love them. It doesn't mean you're abandoning them or betraying them. It means you're growing up, becoming your own person, building a life that's yours. It means you're loving them in a healthy way instead of a codependent way. And yes, they might not like it at first. They might guilt you or manipulate you or tell you that you're being selfish or that you've changed. But you have changed, and that's a good thing. You've changed from someone who couldn't say no to someone who can advocate for their own needs and the needs of their family. That's growth, not betrayal. Margaret still calls every Sunday. David still answers, and they have their 30-minute conversations. But now those conversations are about real things, genuine exchanges about their lives and thoughts and experiences. Margaret tells David about her therapy sessions, about the realization she's having, about the ways she's trying to build a life for herself that doesn't revolve entirely around being David's mother. She's taken up painting, joined a book club, even started dating someone, a widower she met at her church. I think she's actually happy, David said after one of their recent calls. Like, genuinely happy in a way I've never seen her before. Because she's finally living her own life, I said. Because she's discovering who she is outside of being your mother. That's healthy, David. That's what she should have been doing all along. I feel guilty sometimes, he admitted. Like I should have seen this sooner, should have set boundaries earlier, so she could have found this happiness years ago. You were doing the best you could with the understanding you had at the time, I reminded him. We both were. The important thing is that we figured it out eventually, and we're all better for it now. Last week, Emily took her first steps. She stood up from where she'd been sitting on the living room floor, looked right at David, and took 3 wobbly steps into his arms. We both cried, of course, because we're those kinds of parents. Later, David called Margaret to tell her about the milestone. That's wonderful, David, she said, and I could hear the genuine joy in her voice. I'm so glad you were both there to see it. Those are the moments that matter. She didn't ask why we hadn't called her immediately, so she could see it on video chat. She didn't suggest that she needed to come visit right away to see Emily walk. She just celebrated the moment with us, from her appropriate distance, in her appropriate role as grandmother rather than third parent. After David hung up, he looked at me with wonder. Did you hear that? She was happy for us without making it about her, without trying to insert herself into the moment.
She's learning, I said.
We all are. And that's the truth of it. We're all still learning, still figuring out how to be family to each other in ways that are healthy and supportive rather than controlling and suffocating. Some days are easier than others. Some days the old patterns try to reassert themselves, and we have to consciously push back against them. But we're committed to the process. All of us. Even Margaret in her own way. This story doesn't have a neat, wrapped-up ending because life doesn't work that way. We're still living it, still writing it, still figuring out what comes next. Emily will keep growing, keep reaching new milestones, and we'll navigate each stage with the tools we've learned. Margaret will continue her own journey of self-discovery and hopefully continue respecting our boundaries. David and I will keep working on our marriage, keep communicating, keep choosing each other every single day. But if I had to pinpoint the moment everything changed, it would be that phone call 2 years ago. That moment when I heard Margaret's voice in the background, coaching David through a conversation with his own wife, and realized that our marriage wasn't ours at all. That moment of clarity, as painful as it was, gave us the chance to build something real and authentic and sustainable. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being part of this community. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do so now. Click that subscribe button and help us reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers. Your support means everything. So that's my story. That's how I discovered my husband's mother was controlling our marriage and how he fought to take that control back. It's been messy and painful and absolutely worth it. Because now, when David calls me at the end of the day, I hear his voice and his voice alone. Now, when we make decisions about our life and our family, there are decisions made together based on what we want and need and dream of for ourselves and our daughter. And that's all I ever wanted. A marriage that was mine. A partnership that was real. A family that was built on love and respect and healthy boundaries. I have that now, not because it was easy or because it came naturally, but because we fought for it. Because we did the work. Because we believed it was worth saving. If you're in a situation where you feel like someone else is controlling your relationship, whether it's a parent or a friend or anyone else, I hope my story gives you the courage to speak up, to set boundaries, to fight for the relationship you deserve. It won't be easy, but I promise you it's worth it. Because everyone deserves a marriage that's actually theirs, free from outside control, built on genuine partnership and mutual respect. Thank you for listening. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for being part of this journey with me. I hope my story has helped you in some way, whether it's given you validation or courage or just the understanding that you're not alone. We're all out here trying to build healthy relationships, trying to break free from dysfunctional patterns, trying to be better than the generations that came before us. And we're doing it one boundary at a time, one difficult conversation at a time, one choice at a time to love each other in healthy ways instead of harmful ones. That's all any of us can do. Keep trying. Keep growing. Keep fighting for what matters. My name is Rebecca Harrison, and this is my story of how I almost lost my marriage to my mother-in-law's control and how my husband and I fought to take it back. Thank you for listening.